Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, State Senator Edgar Flores joins us here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Carson Valley, it's your place for the good times. Carson Valley.
Big R in Sparks is located on Bering Boulevard next to Smith's and across from Reed High School. It's a 50,000 square foot hardware store and a whole lot more. It's your spring headquarters with lawn and garden supplies, power equipment, and outdoor living. Big R on Bering Boulevard in Sparks next to Smith's and across from Reed High School. Big R, hardware, and a whole lot more.
When in Carson City, Nevada Newsmakers records in the conference room at the Bank Saloon. Coverage of the 2023 legislative session is brought to you by Liberty Dental Plan, making members shine one smile at a time. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you. The Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, your RTC, our community. NV Energy, proudly serving Nevada, providing electricity to 2.4 million electric customers. And by Nevada Builders Alliance, building a better Nevada.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, coming to you from Carson City. We're delighted to welcome in person this time to the program State Senator Edgar Flores of District 2. Pleasure to have you here, sir.
It's an absolute pleasure to join you this morning. Thank you for all the work you do.
Well, I appreciate that. So let's talk about one of your bills that's getting a lot of news at this point in time, which is your outdoor worker bill. Explain to us what the concept of the bill is and the positives and negatives you're receiving so far.
Absolutely. So we started off by reaching out to the small business community alongside of the unions, because one of the things that we didn't want to do is in any way impact or negatively hurt folk that are trying to get a job done. And after having several conversations with them specifically, we came up with a three-pronged approach to issues that we see in Nevada and disproportionately impacting different areas. Southern Nevada, we have a lot of folk who work in extreme heat areas, right? Just
sure.
By nature of living in the desert. And in Northern Nevada, we have an issue with the air quality index. So one of the things that we set out to do was do two things. Create a trigger so that whenever you have individuals that are working at 105 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, that there's a requirement that water be provided to them and water breaks. And that when you're working outdoors in an air quality index of 201 or worse, that they be provided some type of personal safety masks. And there was a lot of enthusiasm because the focus was not to stop work, but rather to provide some safeguards. Along with them, the third prong was that we create a safety plan. If an individual becomes ill as a consequence to working under extreme heat or poor air quality, that there's a plan that everybody will follow. And we left it broad enough to where each industry could design what that plan looks like, because it's different if you're on a construction site versus you're working in somebody's backyard, versus if you're working in the middle of a fire up in the north, or if you're in a remote area in one of our rural areas in Nevada. And so that's kind of how we approached it. Some of the small businesses we've been working with are contractors. We're working with some builders. We're working with folk who own several complexes, and they have folk that are working on their apartments, et cetera, et cetera.
I would imagine roofers would be
roofers, absolutely. HVAC. One of my best friends does HVAC, and he tells me, you know, if it's 105 outside, in that attic it's 115, 110. Sure. And so we work with them, but we have also gotten a lot of pushback, namely from the lobbying community in Carson City, and they're doing their job. I mean, that's their job, to raise any alarm and any concern that they potentially see impacting their industry. Their concern is they don't like the trigger. They would prefer that it be more industry specific and that we work directly with OSHA. The problem with having done that is in the past, OSHA has attempted to come in with regulations through Ledge Commission, but unfortunately, because of the split, nothing has been able to move. And I think that's where we have a responsibility and obligation where unfortunately that can't achieve the purpose of creating some minimal safeguards that we can come in and say, look, through the legislative process, through the vetting that we do here, let's come up collectively with something.
Okay, so I got to ask you a couple of questions. Sure. One, especially in Southern Nevada, but this would apply in Northern Nevada as well during the summer, what company is saying, no, you can't have water or can't have a water break? I mean, I can't even imagine that would be a situation because as you're saying, on a roof, it can be 140 degrees.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I argued by just analogy is there isn't a single time when us who are in the legislature who don't have water available to us in that building, where it's climate controlled and it is a comfortable 70 degrees. I make that point because no responsible employer is not following these rules already without a requirement. Unfortunately, where we've seen it is particularly in some of the businesses where they're overwhelmed and they're trying to accomplish 1,000 things at once. They're taking a lot of jobs, and sometimes they forget the basics, right? Have an ice chest maybe. Some other folk will carry some type of mechanism that will keep their water cool. And it's those type of scenarios, or where it's a small business that sends out people to work by themselves in remote areas. There's this a presumption that maybe they should just purchase the water for themselves. What we're saying is, and by the way, because we're saying 105 degrees, that doesn't even trigger the entire year. It only triggers for a few days out of the year. In Northern Nevada, the air quality index only triggers a few times out of the year.
Okay, and let me ask you about that just briefly. When you're talking about air quality, are you talking about in a firefighting situation? Because I know that we've resolved most of the issues with air quality in Washoe County, at least, a long time ago. So is it just in firefighting type situations?
Those are the main triggers. Now, there are circumstances where the air quality due to pollution may exceed that. Very uncommon presently in the state of Nevada, but it does happen. But namely, yes, fires. And the problem is, if you're, and this is why we exempted anybody who works in emergency situations, firefighters, law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. We exempted them because not only do they have a bunch of things that they've already negotiated for within their collective bargaining agreements, that we could probably agree that they exceed any expectation of safety for their folk. But presently we were talking just with some of our unions about what was happening during the fires. They still needed to complete their task, and we want them to. We don't want folk to stop working. But one of the stories that was shared with me by a specific contractor was that their workers were so incredibly loyal that they stayed outdoors working excessive amount of hours when they shouldn't have. They probably should have worked 2 and then gone home, but they wanted to get the job done. They stayed out there 5-6 hours. But then, unfortunately, had to miss the next 2 days of work because they just felt horrible.
Yeah.
So no employer wants this either. And so in those scenarios, we just want to make sure that those triggers are in place. And by the way, we've had conversations with a lot of small businesses and contractors and other folk who tell us having these triggers in place is not only good to protect the employee, but it also helps us when somebody's pressuring us we have to complete a job. We allow ourselves to have a standard of saying we can't do it unless we provide these minimal safety protections for our workers, and we should want that, right? So I think everybody is in a good place, but understandably the pushback is going to come from folk who just believe that it's very difficult to always constantly provide water, think that maybe it's difficult to ensure that we have the safety masks. I argue on the other side. I think 90% of good businesses, good practice, already demands this. Let's just make sure that if 90% of us are doing it, that we create a statewide standard so the rest of the 10% jump in and join us too.
All right, let's move on to another topic. The Nevada Independent did a story on this over the weekend, where you're taking on after allowing new companies who want to start taxis, limousine services, etc., to be able to operate in the state.
Yes.
This has been a fascinating story that has gone on for years. Where are you with this? Because obviously these industries have been very defensive and putting up as many roadblocks as possible, pardon the pun, to keep new businesses from starting out.
In a nutshell, and I try to be as brief as possible. The NTA,
take your time, we have plenty.
Beautiful. The NTA has...
The Nevada Transportation.
The Nevada Transportation Authority has a 3-member commission. And usually they come from all walks of life. They don't necessarily come from the transportation industry, which is a good thing. They come in with clean eyes and approach things through whatever personal experiences they've had in life, but regardless of who's a part of that commission, they all have a lot of experience in their respective fields. I personally had never engaged with the NTA, the Nevada Transportation Authority, but in essence, almost anything involving transportation, limousines, non-emergency transportation, carriers, the taxi cabs up in the north, and there's a few other categories, movers, people who tow. These 5 categories, if anybody wants to open a business in one of these 5 categories, they would then go before the NTA. They present an application that's very voluminous. They do a background check, and they have to do a financials check. While that's happening, they're working with folk from the NTA who are consistently asking for additional information. What happens presently, and what's been happening historically in the state of Nevada, is that anybody who, in essence, lives in the area, because the criteria is so low, the bar is so minimal, anybody who lives in the area and happens to have a business in that same area has a right to protest this new applicant coming into this area. Why is that problematic? They file something called a petition to leave to intervene. Petition to leave to intervene says, we think this person shouldn't come into this space. And sometimes coming into this space is not because, the fear of somebody coming into this space is not because they have a poor record of maybe operating similar businesses in the past, or because they have a criminal record. Sometimes it's just because they think that business is already too saturated, period. After they file that, there's a discovery phase where the business that's already established, who's already in that space, can then go and request to see what contracts they have, can see who their potential clients are going to be, what area they're going to be serving, what is their business plan. This
would seem somewhat unfair.
It's absolutely unfair. It is frustrating to know that this continues to exist in Nevada for me. And I, again, fell into this inadvertently because we had been working with city council members, legislators, and commissioners because we were trying to better identify issues that impact North Las Vegas and East Las Vegas. And it made sense that we collectively had conversations to see if we were hearing the same thing from our constituency. But more importantly, understanding that every solution that we want to bring to these folk, specifically who we think have been underrepresented and disproportionately represented, that we gave ourselves an opportunity to address it at all 3 levels.
Okay, and can I just jump in
Please.
for a second? Is this because East and North Las Vegas both have a lack of service?
That is our position, yes, that we've historically not provided a lot services.
Because the main service is on the Strip.
The Strip, we do
And
a
the
great work.
airport
And
and
we should.
downtown.
And we should do great work there. And in Summerlin. And we've done a lot of great things in Henderson, and we should continue to do that. My only argument is what we are doing there, we should replicate in East and North Las Vegas. All these beautification projects, widening these lanes, making sure that the flow of traffic is better. They have these beautiful projects where there's trees everywhere, and we've heard about the heat island issues in North and East Las Vegas. But not only that, I mean, just the natural investment in areas where we're starting to put everything underground, but we're not there yet in these areas. And the question is why? I think it's us to blame, bottom line. Legislators should be blamed, commissioners should be blamed, council members should be blamed. Because although maybe they're 1 or 2 and they're in the minority, they have a responsibility to demand that every segment of Nevada looks equally as beautiful. We invest equally. And I don't think there's a Nevadan that would ever argue with that. It's not about taking from here to give to here. It's if we're giving this much here, let's make sure we're doing the same over here. Through that lens, we were having conversations. This is during the pandemic. One of the things that we were talking about is how families, there's multiple, particularly in Black, Asian, and Hispanic families, it's very normal for you to have second and third generation all in a single household. Your parents live there, your grandparents live there, and it's normal that at any given time throughout the day, all the kids are in school, all the adults who are able to work and are fortunate enough to do it are at work, and it's our elderly that stay behind. How do they go to the grocery store? How do they move to the senior center? How do they go get their medication? Those folks, it's not an emergency, but they still have to do it. So we started reaching out to businesses who specifically said, oh, we think it's great. We actually want to serve specifically those populations. So there were some applications that were in the process. They said, could you help us? We wrote a bunch of letters of support coming all up and down the chain from members of the legislature to city council members. We let it go. We followed up with that about 6 months later, and that was the first time that I realized that there was a problem. 6 months had passed from the course of our conversation, and unfortunately, their application was still pending. I didn't understand the process. I didn't know how it worked. So I then took it upon myself to reach out to folk. I said, look, how does this work? Why is it taking so long? And then I learned about the process of the petition to leave to intervene. And I then started watching some of the hearings. I got some of the minutes. And I realized that it was just a fishing expedition. And it became so frustrating to me that I said, unfortunately, these two individuals with these applications, and I say two individuals, although I'm sure they have partners and are doing a lot of work, I said, they might be pushed out and it's impossible for them to come and compete. It becomes impossible. A two-year process, a lot of attorneys, a lot of hearings, and quite frankly, just a lot of BS. And it becomes intimidating, it becomes frustrating, and it becomes very expensive. The average small business can't come into this space and can't compete. I reached out to the folk at the NTA and I asked them, is this process necessary? The question that I started with is there a time that somebody files a protest, an intervener, and that they disclose something that you, through your regular course of an investigatory process to ensure that an applicant is willing, ready, and capable, that you would not have found it yourself? And they had a hard time saying yes to that. In other words, they believe that they would have found everything themselves anyways, because the investigatory process really is that rigorous. So I said, hands down, it's time for me to come in and do something. It's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue. This is straightforward, in my opinion, the very core essence of what we call capitalism.
Okay, were you warned of how difficult it would be to change this?
No. I think had I known that earlier on, maybe my lens would have been different. But I came in, I was too far into the conversation already to step back, and I was too naive to believe that politics were this strong in this conversation. My bottom line is we have a responsibility to do. I've engaged in it. I've documented the whole thing. I've been involved in this conversation now for a year. I have a responsibility and obligation to bring it forth. And what frustrates me even more is that when I talk to my colleagues or when I speak to individuals who are very well versed in this arena, everyone says, I know. I said, how is it possible that this many people can tell me I know, and yet we've sat here subservient to a process that we know is wholly unfair?
Okay, just on a time basis here, I have to ask you to come to a final point here. Do you think you're going to be able to get something accomplished in this session?
I think I have a responsibility to. And by the way, every single legislator has an obligation to.
And you feel that you can succeed in this?
We have to pass this.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. I've got a couple of more issues for you.
Sounds
We'll
good.
be right back after this.
It's the Lucky Lexus Cash and Free Play giveaways at Tamarack. Weekly cash and free play winners plus a $20,000 cash winner guarantee. And drive home a brand new Lexus NX30 or walk away with $42,500 in cash. It's a good time to win at Tamarack Casino.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Save money and take transit. Did you know you can ride the bus all day for less than what it would cost you for a gallon of gas? Plan your trip now by going to rtcwashoe.com.
Truck drivers are some of the hardest working people you'll meet, delivering over 70% of America's freight and 92% of Nevada's. When there's a natural disaster, they're delivering critical supplies to help those communities recover and rebuild. Every sector of the economy and our nation's military rely on truck drivers. So let's take a moment to say thank you. On the open road or city streets, our truck drivers are rolling to make our economy and our nation stronger. Trucking moves America forward.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with State Senator Edgar Flores. There's a bill that has gone away for now. I'm wondering if it'll come back, the Nevada Age Appropriate Design Code. Can you explain very briefly what that is and what your hopes are potentially for it to come back before the end of session?
Sure, and this is another issue that is a bipartisan effort. In a nutshell, we have as a society made certain rules that we want to protect children. And we don't allow folk to drive, right? If you're under a certain age, you can't drive. If you're under a certain age, you can't watch certain movies. If you're under a certain age, you can't sign a contract. If you're under a certain age, you can't smoke or drink alcohol. We've created a whole wide scope of things that we believe that is in the best interest of protecting a child in the state of Nevada, that we're going to disallow them from participating in that. One of the things, and one of the more important areas that we haven't done that in, is the internet. We have created a dual standard where everything you can physically touch, we will limit in a very wide variety of ways what a child can do. But on the internet, there they can touch anything. And more importantly and more frustratingly, anybody can touch them.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Is there any chance, do you think, of this coming back this session? Because nothing dies until after signing.
Of course. Well, I think there's still a lot of us that are very passionate about it. And all we're talking about is creating a minimal standard that we will abide by collectively when you are investing specifically on targeting children, that we have a minimal standard of what you can and cannot do. That is all we are saying.
All right, let's take another break and we'll be right back.
Remember 2010 in northern Nevada, 13 to 14% unemployment, thousands of homes in foreclosure, Nevada's casinos closing? Families in the Reno-Sparks area were hurting. Many were losing everything. Then Story County launched a game changer for our region, a public-private industrial partnership, streamlined permitting, slashed bureaucracy, attracting Fortune 500 companies that made Nevada their home. Story County generated a river of cash to area communities. Economic studies by the state and others for the Gigafactory consistently show positive economic benefits for our region. $4 billion in local wages, $17 billion in consumer spending and economic activity, over $100 million in taxes to Washoe, Story, Reno, Sparks, and Nevada, just for the Gigafactory alone. Story County, improving northern Nevada one industry at a time.
The Nevada Builders Alliance has been protecting the interests of the construction industry for over 50 years. Our programs save members thousands of dollars every year and allow them to provide much-needed benefits to their employees. Our industry also allows Nevada to grow. If you're thinking about a career in the construction industry, reach out. And if you haven't thought of a career in construction, what are you waiting for? We are the Nevada Builders Alliance.
Located in the heart of Carson City, the Bank Saloon is a historic watering hole with a modern feel. With a variety of classic cocktails featuring Nevada spirits, space for private events, conferences, and an incredible atmosphere, the Bank Saloon offers a great location to work and play. Come visit us. Located at the corner of 5th and Carson, we'll save you a drink.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with State Senator Edgar Flores. AJR 6 proposes to amend the Nevada Constitution to adopt the National Popular Vote Compact. I don't understand why anybody in Nevada would vote for something that would take away any influence Nevada has when we have so much influence now. Every presidential candidate has to come to Nevada. The amount of spending on broadcasters, et cetera, is huge. I don't get it. The Electoral College works for small states. It doesn't work for big states like California. We would be lost.
Well, the argument is correct in both directions, quite frankly. If you're thinking about the caucus structure and the investments that come in, and you're thinking about it strictly through that lens, we shouldn't change it.
And the power.
Period. Right. We should never change that, period. Particularly in a state that has such a small population.
Okay, and a brief answer here, please.
But the other side of it is there are folk, and they will consistently make that argument, that if we really want to say it's one vote, and that is your power, the only real system that adheres to that is this popular concept.
Well, I just have to say, as somebody who's watched politics for a very long time, Nevada has incredible power with our 6 electoral votes, and I think it would be crazy for our state to give that away. And I know that a lot of Democrats feel the same way as you do, but I'm just throwing out another opinion here, and I should, register as a lobbyist.
And it's well-founded and respected.
And thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate you coming back, and we look forward to having you on again.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
For 50 years, Nevada Heating has been keeping people comfortable in their homes. At Nevada Heating, call the Do It Right guys and get the air conditioning back on today. That's the Nevada Heating way. Why sweat for days on end when Nevada Heating can get your air conditioning fixed today? Call us today and we'll fix it today at 323-5585 or schedule us on our website at nevadaheating.com.
Imagine a magical garden that feeds Carson City's hungry and homeless, teaches our high school students agriculture, creates hanging floral displays to beautify downtown, and yet charges nothing. It's not magic. It's the Greenhouse Project. It's real, it's growing, and it needs your help. Go online to carsоncitygreenhouse.org so together we can grow it forward.
When in Carson City, Nevada Newsmakers records in the conference room at the Bank Saloon. Coverage of the 2023 legislative session is brought to you by Liberty Dental Plan, making members shine one smile at a time. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you. The Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County, your RTC, our community. NV Energy, proudly serving Nevada, providing electricity to 2.4 million electric customers. And by Nevada Builders Alliance, building a better Nevada.
Our thanks to the Bank Saloon in Carson City and the Builders Alliance for their help with our coverage of the 2023 legislative session. We'll see you on the next broadcast.